You and I had spoke a lot of Thursday nights before your TNT games, and many a times the headlines had to do with Phil Jackson and the Knicks. And you, I believe, at one point had a tweet wondering, would any free agent ever want to sign with this team with some of the things that Phil Jackson had said about his best players? What do you think the state of the Knicks are today after letting go of Phil Jackson?
I think they're still on the nosedive. And look, I'd never want to see anyone get fired, lose their livelihood, especially a guy of Phil Jackson's stature and what he has meant for this league. But let's face it, if the job he had done in New York would have been anyone else, they probably would have been fired after their first year. Mr. Dolan gave Phil Jackson the keys to the kingdom, and he pretty much ran the car straight into a wall. And if you just look at the wins and losses and the coaching turnovers and the comments being made by the best players about the best players on the team, you really have to question what direction were the Knicks headed in. And I will stand by that comment. If you were a pending free agent, why would you want to go to the Knicks when they're going to treat Carmelo Anthony, and in my opinion, has been very gracious of taking the high road throughout the Phil Jackson era. Phil Jackson is the one that gave him the big contract and the no trade. That's all Phil Jackson's doing. So to hear the backstabbing coming out of Phil Jackson's mouth, again, I never want to be an advocate for guys being fired or losing their jobs. That's how they pay their bills. That's how they take care of their family. But if it had been anyone else in that position, they would have been gone half a season or a year in. Phil Jackson had a long leash. He got to the end of that leash, and it was time for him to go, and I'm sure Knicks fans are celebrating.
Reggie, what's the next step for the Knicks now? You talk about the way that Phil alienated both Carmelo Anthony and Kristaps Porzingis. How do you repair this? And is there a guy out there who can come in as a quick fix to replace him to start that process?
Well, I'm not quite sure there's a quick fix, but you do have to find a guy. You're right, Sekou, who's going to come in there and repair the fractured relationship between Carmelo Anthony in the front office as well as Porzingis in the front office. Because right now, your two best players had been dragged through the mud pretty much the last 2 years. And it really tears a team, the structure of a team, the family bond nature of a team, it really tears it apart. So whomever they bring in has to be a great communicator first and foremost. And you've got to get Carmelo and you've got to get Kristaps in a room alone, one-on-one, without agents, and basically fall on the sword. Say, my bad. It's our mistake. We are the ones why we're in this position, and start from there. And I hope they find someone because, look, as a league as a whole, working for Turner Brand and TNT and NBA TV, we need the New York Knicks to be – we need them to be good. You need your number one media market team to play well, to be in the playoffs, to make deep playoff runs. We need the Knicks, and over the last several years, they've been on the back page for all the wrong reasons, and hopefully they find someone who can turn this thing around.
All right, Reggie Miller joining us live here on NBA TV talking about the Phil Jackson news. He is out in New York. The real big story today is that there's a reported deal of Chris Paul headed to Houston to pair up with James Harden. We're still learning of all the details of this trade, very complicated transaction happening between the Clippers and Rockets, Reggie. But what are your thoughts here on Chris Paul and James Harden, who's coming off the best year of his career as the team's point guard? Can those two work in the backcourt together?
I think that's going to be the big question. Can they coexist? If you look at the season James Harden had, I'm sure he was runner-up, obviously, to Russell Westbrook in the MVP voting. It was phenomenal. But the reason why it was phenomenal is because he had the ball in his hand 85 to 90% of the time. And he was the playmaker as well as the scorer. He did everything for that team. Well, now you add a ball-dominant point guard for his whole career in Chris Paul to the mix. It's going to change the dynamic a little bit. Now, hearing the comments coming out of Chris Paul's camp was that he's going to play off the ball more, which is good. Now, remember, he's 33 years old, and there's been a lot of wear and tear throughout the years on Chris Paul. So to me, playing off the ball is a smart thing for longevity for CP3. And as much as I love Patrick Beverley, he's one of those guys I could always play with. It's an upgrade at that point guard position because you get a great defender still in Chris Paul. You get possibly the best leader of men and teams in Chris Paul. And you get a guy that understands what it takes to win, hopefully. Even though he hasn't gone deep in the playoffs, he knows how to run a team. So he'll play off the ball. He's a better shooter. If you look at his three-point numbers over the last few years, Chris Paul's three-point percentage has gone up. So he'll fit well into that 7 seconds or less system of Mike D'Antoni. So the big question will be is how are they going to split up minutes of who's actually has the ball in their hands between CP3 and the bearded one. To me, that will be probably the hardest thing. But Mike D'Antoni, you don't win Coach of the Year. Hey, you're Coach of the Year now. That's your decision. Go ahead and have it.
Reggie, so many people in L.A. will be discussing what Chris Paul's departure means. Whose decision was it? Is it some part of the Jerry West effect going on there? Is this Doc Rivers? How do you parse what went on with the Clippers and Chris Paul in this breakup of theirs that maybe not a lot of people saw coming?
I'm with you, Seiko. I'm a little surprised because at the end of the day, the Clippers were winning 50-plus games, and they had overtaken the Lakers as the basketball team, even though, you know, the Lakers have the championships, the 16 championships, and the Lakers are the bigger draw. But in that building over the last 4 or 5 years, since the CP3 era, it's been the Clippers. The Clippers are the ones that had won 50-plus games and gone to the playoffs. Now, they hadn't been successful, and they've had a rash of injuries once playoffs started, and I think Clipper Nation, and I don't know if this is ownership or I don't know if this is Jerry West coming in and saying, we're going to start fresh. But I am surprised because the Clippers were a 50-plus win team. Now, I know they had their problems come postseason, but you've got to get those 50-plus wins to get to the postseason. So I'm wondering what direction now are the Clippers going to go in when you lose a floor general like Chris Paul. I know people want to talk about his age at 33, but man, in today's game, you've got to have three-point shooter and you've got to have a floor general, a leader, and Chris Paul is as best as they come. So it's a little surprising that the Clippers kind of let him go, traded him away.
Well, Reggie, back in April, you were quoted as saying that you'd still be playing if you could go into the Rockets system. You think you could play with Chris Paul and James Harden now?
I'm going to call Daryl Morey and Mike D'Antoni as soon as we get off the phone with you guys. Because all I got to do is go to that short corner three, my friends, because I just got to shoot threes and tell them to fall back in a 2-3 zone. Fall back in a 2-3 zone, and we're good.
Yeah.
We are good.
Well, Reggie, we appreciate you joining us here and weighing in on the big stories of the day. There might be more happening a little later on, so don't run far from your phone.